everyone, I'm Janine Perez and welcome to Made for Marketers, the show where marketing leaders share their smarts in strategy and execution to help power the customer journey and drive growth. In today's episode, we'll be talking about creating a distinct brand voice. And I'm really excited because today joining us to tackle this topic is colleague and friend and writing extraordinaire, Sara Howard. Sara is the founder and director of Writers Australia, and she's an amazing copywriter. Her and her team help organisations really craft a strong brand voice and develop compelling copy. Thanks for joining us, Sara. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Janine. I'm so excited to be here. And thanks everyone for joining us on this webcast.
You know, this topic of a brand voice and even the topic of storytelling and creating that brand voice, it's almost become a little bit of a buzzword lately and it's lost its impact. And I'm kind of curious to understand, because you deal with this day in and day out, what do you think is a good brand voice? What does it actually mean to have a strong brand voice?
It's a really good question, Janine. I mean, having a voice is actually the first thing, because I'm often surprised by the number of brands who don't have a clearly articulated brand voice. Or if they do, it's sort of a nod to 2 pages in a 140-page style guideline and no one's really seen it and it's hidden in a drawer. And the problem is that nearly everyone in every organisation actually writes on behalf of that brand, and they all need to know what that brand should sound like. So for me, there's 2 really important things whenever we're writing any marketing messages, whether it's a brand campaign or the everyday emails that are part of a customer journey. It's what you say and how you say it, right? And how you say it is the brand voice. And a strong brand voice, for me, is both consistent and distinctive. They're 2 very different things. Consistent is relatively easy if you have a brand voice guide. Everyone in the organisation can write in that style. Hopefully, it's like the ingredients for any effective business writing. But distinctive means it's not like everyone else's, which is often the trap that if you do have a brand voice, particularly B2B brands, I will say, fall into. So a strong brand voice really needs to reflect what makes your brand unique. How do you work at your organisation? What are your values? What's your brand's personality?
Yeah, and they're really great points. I mean, consistency goes without saying, although that's not necessarily always present, but distinction is really important. And as you say, it's not that easy to do. And we'll get on this topic of buzzwords a little bit later, because often that is a trap that many B2Bs fall into. But how do you create distinctiveness so that you've got a voice that resonates and stands above some of the competitors and cuts through the noise that's out there, but do it in a way that does feel kind of authentic and people can relate to and helps others sort of write on the brand's behalf?
Yeah, it is a really interesting question, because most of the time when we get a new brand voice brief, an organisation will say, we really like how these guys write.
Yeah.
Can we just do that? So what we do is we've got a really interesting proprietary system called VoiceBox that's come out of the UK. And someone who specialises in brand voice and brand personality has developed 11 archetypes of voice, which really cut through every type of organisation, B2C, B2B, a really highly professional or academic type voices, right through to really playful and quirky. To get a sense of what those voices are for everyone, we do a tarot card sort. There's 99 different personalities. It's so much fun. Everyone kind of picks out the cards that really reflect how their voice should be, how they want it to be, and what they stand for as an organisation. And from that, it's actually surprisingly easy to then pinpoint what are the unique characteristics of your voice and how that applies to the type of products and services you're going to write about, and the audience as well, how your audience wants to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. And that's really that's critical. I know in a lot of the workshops that we run, whether it's based on audience, understanding the audience in more detail or helping to define the brand proposition in a bit more detail, you always have to understand the audience and how they want to be communicated to, what their issues are. But I think that voice box piece that you just talked to, that's a great way of, sometimes again in workshop environments, getting people to sort of help them articulate what are the things that feel more like your brand and what doesn't feel more like your brand. And then from that, I guess it's a process of synthesizing all of that work and eliminating the excess and just really solidifying what is going to be important for that brand, so it kind of rises to the surface and you can build that into a brand voice guide. So tell me, I mean, the brand voice sometimes feels a little bit of a luxury, I guess, in terms of what a marketer might spend their dollars developing. And I think sometimes, marketers understand the importance of it, but getting the broader organization to see the value in brand voice and why you might embark on a brand voice project. It's a tough battle for some people to kind of, win. Can you kind of help us explain what the benefit of really having a distinct brand voice is, as far as it goes to driving that customer experience, driving the customer journey, helping to really deliver growth for organizations? What role does brand voice have?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting actually, because I think now's a great time actually to be thinking about brand voice, to be honest, because we're in a very reflective state, I feel, at the moment. And a strong brand voice has two really important benefits. One is, as you just said, the customer experience and the customer journey is entirely wrapped up in that brand voice. I was thinking about this the other day. I subscribe to Who Gives a Crap, so I've been lucky enough to have continual toilet paper supply, and everything from the email they send me when everyone was panicking about toilet paper to the wrapping around that toilet paper when I change the roll is playful. It makes me smile, and that's part of my experience with that. So that's the sort of value that a really strong voice can bring to your experience. But on the other side of it, it's also your employee experience. I think we often forget that so many people in our organisations are tasked with a really hard job of writing on behalf of that organisation, whether it's a business proposal or, an email to customers or PowerPoint presentation. And unless we actually give them the tools to do that effectively and give them confidence to do that, we're really putting a lot of pressure on them. And so a really good brand voice with some clear guidelines on what to do, what not to do, what difference it can make when you write well in your brand voice can actually be very empowering for employees as well. And often what we do as part of our brand voice rollout is, once everyone's happy with the voice that, in the marketing and comms team, we actually run training programs for broader staff to show them how to use the voice effectively. And that stops it from being a document in a drawer.
Yeah, absolutely. And get people to live it and breathe it and get some use out of it. Yeah, fantastic. And so you mentioned Who Gives a Crap there. There are a few consumer brands that I can think of who do a similar thing. So they've, as soon as you get something from them, immediately it's them that this message has come from. And sometimes I think in B2B, I know you do a lot of B2B work, we do a lot of B2B work, that feels harder. I don't think it should be harder, but it does feel harder. And so can you think of any examples of B2B organisations who are actually doing this well?
Yeah, it's really important for B2B organisations to remember that they're not selling to businesses, they're selling to human beings. So you can still have a voice that is very human. I think a lot of big tech companies, some big tech companies do this well. And so, obviously we're all getting really 100% on board with Slack at the moment. And the way that Slack talks makes you feel quite comfortable using their product out of the box, right? It's pretty friendly. It's pretty, I call it a warm friend. It's pretty conversational. Other B2B brands might be a little bit more purposeful and bold and kind of inspire a bit of confidence. A lot of universities, that aren't afraid to ask the big questions will have quite a strong, challenging, kind of purposeful brand. I think Atlassian, another tech company, obviously has more of that get shit done, purposeful edge to its brand as well. So I do think it's definitely possible for a B2B brand to have a distinctive voice.
And I think you and I both follow Doug Kessler and I guess the amazing work that those guys do. And he is the prime example of, not only obviously does he run a B2B agency, but services a lot of B2B brands. And, you can see the messages that they put out are so distinctly theirs. Their voice is so distinct. It's so refreshing. It's cut through. And despite the fact that, they've got a team of people writing on behalf of their own brand, they manage that consistency. And I guess that's what we're saying, is that distinction, that level of clarity around what your brand is and how you communicate actually makes it easier for the team to be consistent and to roll out those messages.
Absolutely. And I think they all love writing on behalf of that brand, right?
Yeah, totally.
Things like "don't add to the crap," that's fantastic. And their emails, their emails are great because they get you nodding along. It's like they're talking to you one-on-one directly as a friend, and you have that element of support and empathy, but also a little bit of a surprise. You know, they manage to twist things that make you go, oh, I never thought about that before. And that's very clever. That's not just their voice, that's also their content.
Absolutely.
Their storytelling. Yeah.
Thinking about, for organizations that are looking to really think about their brand voice and take that to the next level. I mean, what you talked about, you gave some tips earlier in terms of how people might get started. If they're wanting to do this themselves and they're not necessarily looking for any outside help, how would you advise them to, you know, think about creating some distinction in their brand and really move it from bland to brilliant?
Yeah. Look, I think it's absolutely something that they can think about internally. If they've got a pretty clear idea of what their organisation's mission and values are, and write those values up on a board, and if necessary, get the thesaurus out and start to think about some of the personality words that go along with those values. So, you know, if we're innovative, which is just a classic buzzword value, right? Yeah. What does that mean? Does that mean we're curious? Does that mean we're always questioning things? Or does that mean we're really creative and we like to spark ideas? And what does that mean as a personality? Does that mean we're open or inclusive? Or what does that mean? And once you can start challenging that on and on, what does that mean? You will hopefully land on at least 2 or 3 aspects that would relate to how you would write in that way. Yeah. And once you do that, then you can then go, okay, what does that mean if we applied it to, let's start with our About Us page on a website. That's probably a classic piece of writing that is probably very business-centric rather than customer-centric, let's say. Let's flip that on its head and rewrite it in this tone of voice and think about the way we would say if we were talking one-on-one to our customer in that value and that personality.
Great, love it. And we've touched on buzzwords a few times now, so let's tackle that topic head on. I saw an article recently, I don't know if you follow David McGuire for Radix Communications, and he wrote a recent article for one of the B2B publications around this topic of business buzzwords, but specifically during the time of COVID. And the interesting point, I guess, that he made is that obviously, you know, I think no one goes in with the intention of you know, playing buzzword bingo and trying to tick off as many words as possible, but for some reason that's kind of often where we get to. And he makes this really interesting point that although often these words start as being very authentic, being very kind of purposeful, etc., the overuse is what causes them to become buzzwords. So how do you balance that? How do you kind of create that sense of, you know, authenticity and, you know, feel like you're writing in a genuine manner without actually avoiding, you know, common words that people get and understand immediately? So
yeah, it's a really big challenge because we don't realise often that these words are becoming buzzwords. I mean, someone said to me yesterday, he's sick of the word masterclass, right? And you know, I think people have different expectations on what words they do and don't love. But there are a lot of words out there, especially in the business landscape, like deliverables or leverage or even stakeholders, where yes, we use them so often that we think they're a shortcut to get our message across. Yeah. But actually, they often get misunderstood, or more common, the reader's eyes glaze over because they're just so abstract, and we can't create that mental movie in our head of what people are saying when we use a lot of abstract language. And so the messages get ignored, and that's a real shame. The other thing I've learned over the years is that often the words we think we're using because we want to sound more intelligent, so often, you know, we want to impress someone with our vocabulary, actually has the opposite effect. There's been some really interesting academic research into this, where if you needlessly use complicated language, your reader thinks you're actually less smart than you think you are. So I would really caution people against that need to use, you know, really highfalutin language. So what I would do to overcome that is, it's a real discipline. And as writers, it's a muscle that we have to exercise every day. Just like everyone else, we're busy, we're under time pressure. It seems a lot easier to use deliverables. And so we actually are ruthlessly challenging ourselves to go, hang on a minute, is there a better way to put that? Even if it uses more words, but simpler words to express the same idea? Will it create a much better story in our reader's mind as to what we actually mean? And I think there's a really good quote by a linguist called Steven Pinker who says, really great writing balances clarity and surprise. And the surprise is what we're looking for, because the surprise is what will keep our readers engaged and keep them reading. It's that aha moment that crystallizes your idea in their head, and you won't do that with buzzwords.
Yeah, great point. Really great point there. And I think you touched on an interesting piece there, which was, we're under time pressure, and often that's what happens. You find your shortcuts and mental shortcuts to get a job done, but in doing that, we don't necessarily realize what we're compromising or what we're sacrificing in that. And that piece of surprise, you're right, is so important, because as readers, we all know that's what we look forward to, and that's what keeps us engaged. And sometimes I think we forget that when we're the writer.
I often think, at the end of the day, sometimes I feel like, oh my God, have I just been on a production line of words? I'm like a factory worker chipping them out. And I don't want to do that as a writer. That's not my craft. So for me, it's a really personal thing to think about new ways of expressing things differently.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sara, for spending the time with us and really sharing your insights and smarts and tips. You've obviously got a font of knowledge there, and really generous of you to kind of open up and share those pieces of advice with us, and things that people can, really take back into the business and execute immediately. But before we let you go, it's time for our segment, Skip or Play, where we're going to throw some random content pieces or content creators at you. And we're going to give you about 30 seconds, and we're going to ask you, Sara, would you like to skip or play them? Are you ready?
All right.
Okay, let's go. Gogglebox.
Skip.
This Old Marketing podcast from
Play.
Cool. Dolly Parton.
I'll play.
The Conversation.
Is that the Richard Fidler one?
It's the publication.
Publication. Oh, play.
Play. Brené Brown.
Play.
Play. The Lonely Planet.
Play.
Maths.
Maths. Oh no, skip.
Faulty Towers.
Play.
Oh, yeah, that's all we've got time for. So thank you. That's just a little bit of fun and helps us,
what to expect from that.
That's the point. We want it to be kind of a bit of a surprise. But thank you. It also kind of helps us understand, I suppose, where some of your interests lie. So thank you once again. It's been amazing having you on. You've always got so much insight to share. So really, really thank you for spending the time with us today.
Oh, thanks, Janine. It's always lovely chatting to you, even if it's through a screen.
And for those that want to reach out to you or get in touch, what's the best way for them to reach you?
You can go to our website, which is writers.net.au, or you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you can find me, Sara Howard at Writers Australia. Thanks, Janine.
For everyone else who's watching, if you liked this episode, please do like it, share it around. If you've got anything to share in comments, please feel free to add those. And if you'd like to subscribe for episodes to go straight into your inbox, you can do that on our website as well. Until the next episode drops in about a fortnight, take care and we'll see you then.